a lot of what I do is centered on this idea of working with people to help them to realize the worth of what they know, the value of what they know.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to We Are DeFreeze Perspectives.
We have a lot of responsibility. We reach thousands and millions of people through the projects that we're doing.
We are a creative agency maximizing the positive impact on businesses, society, and our planet.
So if you currently look at all communication marketing campaigns, it's not always representing society.
Radical change needs to happen now. Otherwise, brands and companies are going to get left behind.
You know, if you're a marketing manager, if you're in a senior position, you're an opportunity maker. So how can you redistribute those opportunities in an interesting way?
Every week, founder Mitchell talks to visionaries and change makers who are shaking up the status quo.
We create content for every living soul on this planet.
Get ready to be launched into a new perspective.
We've got a quick fire question round. What's your favorite meme?
I mean, Bernie meme,
Yeah.
Bernie Mittens. Yeah.
Who's your inspiration?
My mum.
Pre or post-COVID life?
I'm going to say post.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a beautiful world as long as we keep changing narratives
Yeah.
for the better.
Yeah, exactly what he said.
Best compliment you've ever received?
So my partner doesn't really give compliments very freely because he says I often look for them. So anything that comes from him, like, yes.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So good to have you here. I'm so excited. I've been talking all week, well, I think the last month, about this conversation with you already, how excited I am. Can you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, sure. My name is Isabel Crabtree Condor. I'm half English, half Peruvian, and I'm living in Amsterdam. And currently working as a knowledge broker for Oxfam with a sort of focus on activism, movements, and narratives. Yeah.
So excited.
It's quite a lot of words to put in, like, kind of.
Yeah, but wow, I want to know all about it. How did you get where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I can present a really, like, kind of super strategic version of that story, but I think it was a lot of very happy accidents and opportunities that presented themselves. And I mean, I think for as long as I remember, I was brought up in an activist household, like journalist dad, activist, human rights mum. So from a quite young age was, made aware of the fact that there are differences in what people can access in the world. And so for me, that kind of, I was sort of brought up with a mantra of, like, if you don't like the way something is, you should do something to change it. I hope my mum doesn't mind me stealing her mantra, but anyway.
It's a great spirit.
Yeah, exactly.
Mindset.
And so from quite a young age, there was just this sense that I wanted to work in something in that area. It's quite a big area, right? Sort of like activism or journalism or politics. And so I guess I tried different things out. I tried journalism. I wasn't really very good at it, as my editors at the time will attest to. But I did learn how to write and the power of the written word. And then I worked for a while, like in the House of Lords, where I kind of learned all about influence and power and abuse of power. And then at a certain point, I was like, okay, maybe London isn't the right spot for me right now. Maybe I need to go and be somewhere else. And being part Peruvian, part English, you already start with an idea that you want to be in other places. So I sort of, found myself in international development work. A few different little happy accidents along the way. Found a job in Amsterdam that felt like it was, a really beautiful potential reflection of who I also wanted to be. And it was knowledge broker, which is a really interesting kind of job title anyway. Yeah, and here I am.
Yeah. Wow. A knowledge broker. What is it? How do you define what you do?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, the way I've now grown to define it, I guess, because when I started, no one else really in my organization knew what it was either. And that was a kind of massive advantage because it meant, like, there weren't any other knowledge brokers in the organization. So there wasn't anyone to tell you that you were doing it right or wrong. So there was a lot of space to actually shape it. And what it's sort of begun to be is a connector, principally, right? So somebody who bridges and connects people living and working and breathing in really different environments, different languages, different cultures. And like a lot of what I do is centered on this idea of working with people to help them to realize the worth of what they know, the value of what they know, from both their lived experience as much as their sort of academic, whatever it is that they've done. So, balancing that expertise and experience, and getting them in a position where they feel both confident to share what went well and also what didn't go well, like what were the wins and what were the fails, with others, so that others can learn from that really valuable, beautiful experience in a really honest and kind of profound way. And ultimately, the idea is that you kind of engage in these sort of different types of learning processes that I might kind of create around people or with people, and the end result is doing things differently. So however you want to define that, like it might be taking ideas or inspiration from somebody else's experience. It might be feeling less alone and therefore more energized to go out and keep doing this critical kind of work. It might be connecting to new people, to new perspectives. And then in doing so, you're also kind of furthering your own knowledge and ability to connect and do things differently.
With that comes narrative power. Can you define narrative power? Who uses it and in what ways?
So yeah, a lot of what I know is really grounded in knowledge, experience, expertise that I draw on from my network. But what I learned that narrative power is all about, it's sort of thinking about narrative power as a sort of the many, many stories that exist around us that help us to make sense of the world. So on the one hand, and this is why they're really powerful as well, why narratives are powerful. On the one hand, they connect our interior and exterior worlds. So like it's the thing that bridges what you see out in the world, in the real world, and how you actually decide to look at the world. It influences so much of what we, and it often is made up of what we think is true. So kind of core beliefs, norms, and values that our societies condition us to think as just normal, as just natural. But they're actually socially constructed. And a lot of what narrative power is about is sort of thinking about narratives as dynamic. So they're not just like something written down in a text or just a story. They're things that give that story kind of its depth and power for people. So, for example, it's often about looking below the surface rather than just the story, which might be the kind of superficial kind of top level of it. So when we talk about narrative power, it's not giving it a value judgment. So it's not necessarily saying it's positive or negative. It just is. It can be used positively. It can be used negatively. It can be used to activate people using kind of us versus them narratives, instilling fear. But it can also be used to encourage people to feel like change is possible and they can be part of it. So that's kind of, for me, sort of what it's about.
How do we do a better job of shaping narratives?
We're all reinforcing or reshaping narratives every day, whether we're aware of it or not. So one is like becoming aware of that power and thinking about narratives as more than just a communications device, right? So if we take that starting point that I gave of like narrative power, which is like an explicitly feminist approach, then you can really your understanding of why things don't change becomes so much more nuanced. And once you become more aware of it and you're really taking kind of an explicit like power lens, you're looking at that through a power lens, so thinking about yourself as having power in that situation, questioning yourself a little bit of like, what is the invisible story that I'm telling here? What is the subtext to what I'm sharing? What is the undertone to the images that I'm selecting? What is that communicating non-verbally to my audience? So I think that's one thing that we really need to be good at and better at, questioning our own biases, our blind spots. Like if you don't know what your blind spot is, like go and find out, because you can just Google it. There's so much research and material out there. So I think like education and self-education is a really kind of important one. So I think that's another one. I think being aware of your own power, and in relation to others, is really important. Then no one can really change a narrative on their own. Like that's kind of, I think also if we take a power perspective, it's very hard to change what is known about a topic on your own. I'd say it's almost pointless. So like, as you mentioned before, collaboration is critical. And I really have a kind of, there's a particular type of collaboration that I find really enriching, and that's creative collaboration. So that means doing stuff with other people who are different to you. And the final thing that I think is also, which is related to collaboration, but kind of goes a step further, is really thinking about, rather than trying to create always your own new narrative, although you can obviously do that, and there's a lot of psychology as well behind this, these kinds of approaches. But thinking about working with others, so like collaborating with social movements, collaborating with initiatives for change, and amplifying those narratives that are actually emerging from people with lived experience of the issues that you want to change the narrative on. I think those are kind of some good kind of takeaways for changing narratives. Yeah.
How do you start a conversation and break out of narrative echo chambers?
Find people that don't agree with you. And chat to them. It could be reading something from somebody whose perspective you maybe don't always agree with, and seeing, hey, what can this teach me? What can I learn from this perspective? Where is this person coming from? I think another thing that really helps with not just stepping out of your narrative echo chamber, but just generally helps with any kind of collaborative effort with people maybe that you don't always align with or flat out disagree with, is thinking, why is this person thinking this? Like, what brought them to this place where they think so differently from me? And what brought me to this place where I think so differently from them? Rather than being like, you're wrong, I'm right, shut up. Which is definitely not how to step out of your echo chamber.
Thank you very much. I love having this conversation with you.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming over, and I hope to speak soon. All the best.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks for having me.